Mike Richman is a veteran journalist and author who has his articles featured in Sports Illustrated, The Washington Post, and the iconic Baltimore Sun. Mike is also the author of the Redskins Encyclopedia, Washington Redskins Football Vault, Joe Gibs, An Enduring Legacy, and coming out on November 1st, George Allen, A Football Life. Mike also has the distinction of being the very first guest on our new podcast series, Iconic, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. I have some questions for you, Mike.
Sure, Zach.
Obviously, that's what it's all about.
Great to be on with you.
Before we discuss your new book, George Allen, A Football Life, I would like to mention two things about Mike that some people may not know. Number one, you're a Maryland Terp, and you were at the University of Maryland at the same time as the legendary Boomer Esiason. What was it like to go to school at the time that Boomer was on campus? What was the talk about him? What was his legendary status? What was the big, I guess, scuttlebutt about Boomer back in the day?
Boomer, yes.
Boomer Esiason.
So let me go back just a few years. I believe he was recruited by Jerry Claiborne, and Claiborne was like a 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of quarterback. So when Boomer really got his first chance, which I think was in the 82 season when Boomer, I think he started a few games in 81, but then he really became the bona fide starter in 82. The program took off. I don't want to say they were one of the top-ranked teams in the country, but they were really, really fun to watch. They were much more of a wide-open offense. Boomer was the leading passer in the ACC, or one of the leading passers at the time. He was really an electrifying quarterback, and he led them to some big wins in that era. It changed the whole view of the program. At one time was a run-based offense. Then it was passing. It was much more. It was more pleasing on the eye to watch.
I would say electric. I remember that time watching the Maryland Terps going, wow, who's this guy Boomer Esiason? He's pretty good. I hope the Giants get him.
The lefty. Everybody was so surprised that he fell to the second round in 84. It's like, I of course wanted the Redskins to draft him, but they had they had their eyes on Jay Schrader, I guess, who I think was a second or third round pick that year. Mm-hmm. Boomer fell to the second round, and we all knew that Joe Theismann, eventually he wasn't going to last forever. So,
well, it's a good thing that the Redskins got Schroeder, because had they gotten Boomer Esiason would have gotten knocked unconscious in that championship game by the Giants. All right. Obviously, you're a Redskin fan based on your books, and I'm going to give you a pop quiz. What happened on November 10th, 1996, at RFK Stadium? I was actually there for that event. Being a Giants fan, I was there.
That day, Boomer Esiason, quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals, threw for 550 yards. He brought the Cardinals back from what I believe was a 21-point deficit in the fourth quarter. Is that
that's correct. That's absolutely correct. He had his biggest passing yardage game of his career. And I was in the stands. Somehow I was doing talk radio down in Norfolk, Virginia. And we had a bus trip up to RFK Stadium. And I'm like, yeah, what the hell? I'll root for the Cardinals. So I was rooting for the Cardinals, and there's Boomer. Everybody knows a story about Boomer, and he's just lightening up, right?
Right.
And I remember towards the end of the game where Norv Turner was probably on that winning drive, and he did a pitch out to the left side, and the running back got nailed for a loss. And I'm thinking to myself, you're in field goal range. Why wouldn't you run it up the middle to get an extra 2 or 3 yards at the very least, and kick the winning field goal? Which, by the way, the field goal kickers on both sides kept missing back and forth, I think even in overtime, for what I remember.
Well, tell me if this is incorrect. Didn't the Redskins kicker, he made the game-winning field goal in overtime, but I think the Redskins tight end on the field goal
there
was
must have been a penalty.
Holding.
Could have been.
It was a 10 or 15-yard penalty that pushed them back. Well, and the Redskins would have won that game.
Well, I don't know exactly, because at that point, I'm laughing. I'm laughing hysterically because I'm surrounded by Redskin fans, and I'm like, oh, this is great.
But it was typical Norv Turner. He found, as nice a guy he was, and we had great conversations and interviews, he seemed to find ways to lose.
Which, when you think about his history with Dallas Cowboys and being part of those championships.
He's the offensive coordinator.
Right. I mean, how did you screw that up?
He was the hottest name in coaching.
Now, your new book is coming out in November, George Allen, A Football Life. It's interesting not only to Redskin fans, but to anyone who loves football and appreciates what I call football perfection. What made George Allen a great coach? What are the ingredients that made George Allen this amazing football coach?
He was an innovator. At the time that he coached he became an NFL head coach in 1966, but even prior to that, he was the defensive coordinator of the great Chicago Bears team that won the 63 NFL championship and had one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. He was using defenses that nobody had seen before. The blitz packages that he had, the nickel dime defenses, nobody had seen that. He was a true innovator in the game, a pioneer in that sense. Special teams, he made special teams special. Pretty much when he became a head coach, so many of his wins were based on how good his special teams did during the game. Block punts, field goals, kick returns. He put so much emphasis on the area of special teams. So that is one aspect of his coaching that made him great. Also, I don't want to say he was the first coach that worked 24/7, but he was such a workaholic. He was like the ultimate perfectionist. Every detail had to be covered. As the saying goes, he would know the opposing team better than they knew themselves. Now, obviously that's impossible, but that was what he aimed to do when he coached.
In order to find out more information about your enemy, we go back to my military days, military intelligence. What was his football intelligence schematic? How did he go about to learn his opponent so well?
Well, number one, he was a voracious reader. I mean, he read about a lot of other coaches who were great. So that's one way he learned. Film. He watched so much film. And he learned how to do that, how to really take advantage of film. Sid Gilman, I'm sure you recognize that name. He was an assistant coach under Gilman with the 1957 Los Angeles Rams. Gilman was the type of, I think there was this saying about Gilman that not only did it dominate his day, but Gilman was really one of the first coaches to put so much emphasis on watching game films. Hallis did it too. And George Allen learned from George Hallis. He coached under Hallis for 8 seasons with the Bears. So those guys, George Hallis learned it. And those were back in the days when, and actually George Felix Allen, George Allen's eldest son, who I interviewed for the book, he would tell me that he would be in the room when his father was watching the game film. And back then, you had the reels on the films, and he would go back and forth, watching each play and dissecting everything he could about the opposing team. So to answer your question, I think that touches on it.
Well, I do believe that when you do things like that, when you research your opponents, they do have tendencies. And to recognize what's coming and the ability to have anticipation, I think is a key ingredient to success in whatever your endeavor
Absolutely.
is. You have to anticipate.
Practice makes perfect.
You also wrote a book about Joe Gibbs. And my thought is, what were the similarities and differences between the two coaches, George Allen and Gibbs?
Sure. Joe Gibbs was primarily an offensive-minded coach. And I should say that the reason the primary reason he's in the Hall of Fame today is he won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. I think there's a major contrast between the two coaches, Allen and Gibbs, in terms of what they focused on primarily in the game. I mean, Gibbs being offensive-oriented and Allen defensive-oriented. But the similarity, the key similarity, I'd say, between the two is what I touched on before with Allen. The workaholic nature of Gibbs was just as much, if not greater. Gibbs was known to sleep in his office at Redskin Park. I think Allen did to a very large extent too. But Gibbs, I think the real story came out with Gibbs. He had the cot in the office at Redskin Park, and also he and his assistant coaches, he would demand a lot from them too, as would Allen. They would go down to the basement of Redskin Park, which they called the submarine, and they would say, oh, when they knew time was up, when they had to go home, which would be like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, the trash truck, they'd hear the trash truck outside. So they knew it was time then to go home.
All right. If you were to answer this question in your mind, I don't even know if it's possible. In your mind, who is the better coach?
I'd have to say Gibbs. On the whole, he was the better coach. He was better because, well, record-wise, number one. I mean, having won 3 Super Bowls. I think Allen, he kind of came up short in that area. Number one, they lost the Super Bowl 7 to the 17-0 Dolphins, but he never really brought the Redskins back to that elite level, because I think the belief is, and I touched on this in the book, is that he put so much emphasis on veteran players. He wouldn't dare to be bad for a season or two. Drop to the bottom part of the selection order in the draft and take some really good college players. He never really did that when he was with the Redskins. And I also will touch on the fact that I think his best teams were with the Los Angeles Rams in the 60s. Those were really his best teams, with the fearsome foursome, Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen, that defense. But he also had what the Redskins didn't have. He had a really good quarterback in Roman Gabriel with the Rams in the 60s. Billy Kilmer, he was primarily Allen's quarterback through the 70s. He was a serviceable to good quarterback, but Gabriel was at the height of his career.
Well, what would you say? The amount of wins or championships are good measurements?
I think that has to be the main measurement, really. I mean, that is what, I mean, in terms of Gibbs, winning 3 Super Bowls,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's the first thing that puts him above Allen. And Gibbs' playoff record as well. I mean, he was 16-5 in the playoffs. In the postseason, Allen was 2-7. I mean, you know very well that when players are selected for the Hall of Fame, I don't want to say like it's the total consideration, which it obviously isn't. I mean, you could take Dan Marino into consideration there, but winning Super Bowls is a really big deal.
Well, that's why Eli Manning belongs there. 2 Super Bowl championships.
I do agree with that.
I don't buy this. You're either in or you're out.
Right.
As far as Hall of Famers go. And to me, even though I'm a Giants fan, I could look at him and go, yeah, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Another one who deserves to be there is Phil Simms. He was part of 2 championship teams.
Yes.
And in an era where it wasn't one on your arm, it was run on how you manage your offense.
Right.
Right? So
he wasn't that flashy quarterback.
No.
I think that's what possibly keeps him out. But neither was Bart Starr. But he won
exactly
all the championships. But let me ask you this along these lines. Do you think Kurt Warner, if he hadn't won a Super Bowl, would be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, like a Dan Fouts. I mean, there's some people that are so exceptional at their position that whether they win championships or not, that's not how they're defined. It's not your fault if you're a great quarterback and a team around you sucks to the point where you just don't win anymore. Right? So I think some of the greatest Hall of Famers were maybe looked upon as some of the biggest losers, right? Showing up every Sunday and playing your best game regardless of what you're given and making everybody else that surrounds you better at what they do. There's something more to life than winning it all, right? I mean, it's great if you're the champion. Fantastic.
Right.
But the guy and the gal who just goes there every day and does their best, gives it their best no matter what endeavor they're involved in.
Or you could put Archie Manning in that category.
Archie Manning belongs in there. Yeah. Boomer Esiason is a Hall of Famer. Sorry. But he's such a, on and off the field, such a great example of what it means to be a hero in a sport.
Right.
Without Boomer Esiason, I doubt that people diagnosed today with CF would live as long as they live. Mm-hmm. Okay? There wouldn't be these treatments. There wouldn't be these medications and therapies without Boomer.
Right.
And he started working with CF before his own son was diagnosed.
Fibrosis, yes.
Right? Cystic fibrosis.
Right.
So he's going to be honored in the Ring of Honor by the Bengals on, I think, September 24th is the date.
Do you think that he will someday be considered as a senior candidate for the
Oh, yeah,
for the Hall
for
of Fame?
sure. His off-the-field and broadcasting part is Hall of Fame material.
Right.
The man is just amazing to me.
Absolutely.
Don't tell him I said any of this stuff because I don't want to, he's already got a big enough head. Now, as you know, I'm a New York Giants fan. You're a Redskin fan. What makes the Giant-Redskins rivalry so unique and almost friendly compared to that of the Cowboys and Eagles? Both teams I absolutely loathe, by the way.
It's a very, very good question, Zach. I just think it's something. First of all, they're longtime rivals. I mean, Giants were one of the original teams in 1925. The Redskins, basically the same thing, 1932. So maybe it's just the fan base. The fan base is, I think one of the reasons, let's take the Cowboys, for instance. We loathe the Cowboys because of their pompous reputation.
Yeah, every year they're winning the NFC East and they're going to the Super Bowl.
Right. They're on the cover of Sports Illustrated every
and their
year.
fans drive me nuts.
Right. And their fans are like, they've never been to a game in Dallas, but they're still fans. Like there are plenty of them. We call them like the Landover Cowboys, Landover, Maryland, where FedEx Field is.
Oh.
They come out to those games. We call the Landover Cowboys fans. They've never been to a game in Dallas, but they're Cowboys fans. Their fans are conceited. They think they're going to win it every year. So I think that's why. And the Cowboys are like, they're the marquee team, basically, in the eyes of everyone. They get the primetime games for the most part. Everybody wants to see them on TV. That's really why we loathe them. And also because, they have had success in the past.
Yeah, all right, 30 freaking years ago.
Albeit,
Let's
right,
stop already.
It hasn't been in the past quarter century.
Exactly.
The Eagles, their fans are just obnoxious. And
absolutely. They have a jail right on site, right? I mean,
even in the new stadium? I know they had one in Veterans Stadium.
That's all you need to know. Didn't they throw ice balls at Santa?
Santa Claus.
I mean, come on.
Not only that, they bent my license plate, which says Skin 75. They knew I parked in the media lot.
Well.
But I'll tell you this. Also with the Eagles, and I think this has played into the fans and how they've acted over the years, being obnoxious. Philadelphia has been known as like a pit stop between New York and Washington, as is Baltimore. So I think that has played into the mindset
the
of
psyche.
The psyche.
Well, I guess Redskins and Raven fans, you must have a unique rivalry across state, right?
I wouldn't say it's like a true rivalry
because you're not in the same division.
No,
you might play each other in the Super Bowl one day.
But we just beat them
I saw that the first time that they've lost.
First loss. They had a 24-game winning streak in the preseason.
Right, which, if you're listening, does not count. I mean, if that's what you're like bragging about, your preseason. I will say this about this year's preseason. It seems to me very competitive. It wasn't the same boring stuff that I'm so used to watching.
Right.
And back when I was a kid, I can remember that even in preseason, we'd play the Eagles on occasion in Washington, right? So the preseason no longer is like that. You don't play any of your...
Well, you're referring to when the preseason was 6 games, actually.
Oh, I guess.
And
was it that
coaches
long?
put much more emphasis on winning preseason games. I mean, I give all the credit to Harbaugh on winning 24 straight. But like George Allen, for instance, he would want to go 5-1 or 6-0 in the playoffs. I mean, he would want that type of momentum
in the preseason.
Heading into the regular season, because he would play mostly his starters in the preseason. But now that's not the case.
No, 3 games, and we got 18 games, 17 games. I think they're going to stick in an 18th game. That's why I'm saying that, Let's get back to your book. We're with Mike Richman, who is the author of George Allen, A Football Life, which is going to be available on November 1st. You can go to his website. We'll get to that in a second to buy the book. What sounds like a great idea, the whole idea of what you came up with this George Allen book, to me sounds like a great idea for a History Channel thing. I don't want to say a certain, sports network that would, do something on it. Sounds like one of their things.
Right.
Because they're a competitor. I'm not going to mention their name. That's not happening.
Okay.
I'm not going to give them 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fair enough.
But it sounds like a great sort of documentary that would be very interesting to football fans and non-football fans.
Right. Well, that's a very interesting point because, and I clearly wrote about this in the book. This was definitely part of the narrative. He was more than just a football coach. There's much more to his life. He was friends with 3 men who later became U.S. presidents. He was friends with Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump.
I got to say, he's picked some really good friends.
I also want to say...
Don't throw stuff at me. Don't you start. Yeah.
He was apolitical for the most part. The first time, Reagan's first campaign in 1980, he did campaign for him. He led a bus tour up the Hudson, but George Allen did. Mm-hmm. But other than that, he was mostly apolitical. And he served as Reagan's chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. He knew Nixon. They met at an NCAA banquet in the early 50s. Nixon was invited, and Allen was the coach at Whittier at the time.
Well, of course, that's where Nixon went to college. I went to Whittier. I wasn't a Harvard guy. I wasn't a Yale guy. I went to school, Whittier, California, small town. Yeah. I loved Richard Nixon even as a kid.
So
Just
they met
something about
there,
him.
and then they stayed in touch in the ensuing years. And then when they intersected in the nation's capital in '71, when Allen became the Redskins coach and Nixon was in his third year in the White House, then their friendship really took form. And then there's the infamous moment of Nixon calling the play in the '71 playoff game, which I definitely explained and tried to answer what influenced him to call the play, and did he really call it on his own, or was he influenced by someone else to make that call?
Legend has it that Richard Nixon was also a Giants fan because he lived up in North Jersey, and he would attend Giant games every now and then.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't he be?
But he was, I think it's fair to say, the Redskins were his number one team.
I guess.
He also liked the Dolphins, too. He had a home in Key Biscayne, right?
Well, he had a home in New Jersey, so maybe he liked all three teams. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't mind the Redskins because when my mom was still alive, my brother Billy, who married a Redskins fan, and they go to the games, they were so sweet to my mother at the stadium. I'm like, how can you not like these guys, right? They made sure that she was fine, that she was taken care of. They made sure that she was fed, and they looked out for her, right?
Right,
I'm thinking, all right, cool, all right. That she wouldn't get that in Philadelphia. They wouldn't care. They push her down the stairs, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's endearing to me. It says a lot.
There's more of a civility regarding maybe the Redskins and Giants fans, to touch on your earlier question, than the Philadelphia fans.
I mean, you could be even a Dallas Cowboy fan or an Eagles fan at Giant Stadium and walk out alive. You can't do that. I'm not saying, I've never been to Dallas. I'm sure that the Dallas fans are okay, that they're not going to start fights because they're afraid of people from New York. They think we're all Sopranos, right? I don't want to get whacked. But Philadelphia, no, you could forget it. I actually quit a radio station that I was working in Philadelphia because I couldn't stand the Philadelphia Eagle fans. How about that?
Wow.
That's commitment.
Well, I have an anecdote. I have an anecdote for you. I was in Philly going to getting my master's degree at Temple University the year that Buddy Ryan was fired, and everybody knew I was a Redskins fan. So, like, these people were saying to me, "You got our coach fired." And Buddy Ryan, he was axed because he couldn't win a playoff game. I mean, he'd lost 3 playoff games. But in touching on Gibbs, that was the year of the body bag game. Talking about how great Gibbs was.
Mm-hmm.
And the Eagles were heavily favored in that playoff game at Veterans Stadium. But Gibbs won that game 20-6.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So just some of the information you'll get if you get the encyclopedia, the Redskins Encyclopedia.
Absolutely.
Then we have the Redskins Football Vault. What is that about?
That is, I would say, it's primarily a memorabilia book.
Uh-huh.
That is, there's replicas of game program covers, press passes, ticket stubs. I wrote the text for the book. It's a slimmed-down version of the encyclopedia. There's not as much verbiage in the.
So it's a picture book for less intelligent fans. Just kidding. I had to throw that in there.
No, there was the text that I wrote in there. I added a lot of new items compared to what I had in the encyclopedia. Did do new interviews for it. But I think what really makes that book special is the memorabilia.
Cool. And Joe Gibbs, An Enduring Legacy. Did Joe Gibbs give you any feedback on that book?
He did not. I didn't actually interview him for the book, but I had interviewed him in the past for other mediums. What I did is that, first of all, that book is divided into 4 sections. It's Redskins, NASCAR.
Good.
Gibbs Foundation, Youth for Tomorrow.
Okay.
What influenced him to start the foundation and how it was doing at the time. And then his spiritual life.
Well, that's all good stuff.
The 4th section. And so I wrote the text for the Redskins part and the NASCAR part.
I actually have a friend, his name is Gerald, who's on one of the teams, the number 20 team at the time, Matt Kenseth. So we went down to Joe Gibbs Racing, and I guess we got there at the wrong time because they all went to church, they went to chapel, and the coach was doing his thing.
Right.
Yeah. So he lives by what he believes in. You got to love
guy.
that stuff. Well, thanks for being a guest on Iconic. First guest on Iconic. Before we finish, tell us how we can find you online. Give us your social media and how to get a copy of your new book that's coming out on November 1st, George Allen, A Football Life.
Well, thank you, Zach, for having me on. My book is available for pre-order through my website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com, and Richman is spelled Richman, MikeRichmanJournalist.com. My Facebook page, where I post a lot of items related to the book and other posts on the team and other sports related matters, is Mike Richman. And Twitter is MSR @MSR_journalist.
You know, everybody's going to forget all of that stuff. They're just going to go to your website, or they'll Google Mike Richman. Google Mike Richman. That's a great way to find Mike.
Right.
Mike, you also on your website have services available for people. You do press releases and stuff like that.
Right.
Tell us a little bit how you can help somebody if they want to be an author or need some PR work or things like that.
Right. Well, I can ghostwrite books. That's
Good.
one of the ways I can help people. Press releases, as you mentioned, background papers. Something else I can do, which I have a lot of experience in, is doing voiceovers.
Yes. Can I say?
Absolutely.
Mike Richman is the voice of the Veterans Administration, so you might be listening to radio stations like New HD and hear all the things that the VA is up to. That's Mike Richman. He writes the copy and he voices the spots and does a great job at that. So yes, you're also a voiceover artist. Is there anything that you can't do? Maybe the dishes. I mean, Cheryl's here, your wife.
Well, I'm able to take out the trash. And I do. That's a good point. I do empty the dishwasher. I do my best to keep the house clean, although my wife Cheryl would disagree with that. But I really try my hardest. I feed the cat.
Yeah, that's good.
I feed the cat. I make sure that her belly is full. And so I do various items around the house. I used to cut the grass, but I've been relieved of that duty.
I have people for that. I don't
I've
cut
been
the
relieved
grass.
of that responsibility.
Not doing that anymore. That's great. And shovel the snow. Do you have somebody for that?
We occasionally
you
have
get
snow.
Cheryl out there. Go get in your boots and get out there.
We team up on that.
Shovel it up.
But we've had some mild winters lately.
We really have. No, we haven't had bad weather at all. But you're down in the D.C. area?
In the D.C. area.
So, you guys.
Montgomery County, Maryland.
Right.
Potomac,
Okay.
Maryland.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. You, Mike Richman, are iconic.